So where have I got to with my single state as opposed to married state now? I've been single for about 5 years or so, I don't know. Might be approaching 6 by now, I'm not sure. Now, is it that the meaning of life can only be in seeking the eternal, which is devotion to God in simplistic terms, if you like? What I've said in previous to this, devoting oneself to loving kindness, care of life, in and devotion to understanding what that true care would be and how to do it. Does this mean that one can't be married because, your married partner would have a pretty awful life, in that your devotion is not really to her as the meaning of your life, but to God? And I suppose the Christian answer is that, no, you can continue with marriage, or at least one of the branches of Christian, not the Catholic view. The Catholic view is that the priest is celibate, of course, and doesn't get married. But the Protestant view is, and the nonconformist view tends to be, no, marriage is fine state of God. It's part of the experience of living in the universe, God's creation, and we can come to God through doing that. Let's think about that for a minute, shall we? Well, I guess we should also add the understanding that, it might be okay if the married partner, that both partners are seeking God in that way. To what extent they're actually going to be together, then I'm not sure, except that 2 is better than 1, and 2 united in being loving and kind and reaching out to bless others will be more effective than 1 on its own. And of course the blessings of having someone forever of like mind to relate to. Yeah, I think I'm going down that path again. Okay, it has to be someone special though. Special in the sense that you've got to find someone who's as devoted as yourself to, in a way, as devoted and also compatible with your own devotion without swamping each other, is the usual view, because each has their individuality to bring to the relationship. So it's a tremendous practice now for the 2 of you as individuals to, in the smallest way possible, of practicing what it's like to be in the kingdom of heaven, where you are accommodating, as I understand it, someone with slightly different values in a harmony, and you're finding a harmony so that the 2 of you can act happily, yet being uniquely individuals, distinct, with the contribution that such individuality brings, the different view of God, if you like, slightly. But that there be found a spirit of inclusion, a spirit of harmony, of embracing, in a way, what the PC, political correctness, tries to do with cultures. Says, they've got their individual cultures, but we want them to live in harmony. Now, what principles do we need to have for them to be in harmony without them losing their separate identities, which they so cherish and value, and perhaps which we should cherish and value. You know, that's even the political view, isn't it? We should cherish their differences, not see their differences as insurmountable problems to be removed by segregation or what have you, you know. I mean, the world solution was apartheid, wasn't it? The only solution is to keep them apart, build walls, have a separateness, well, because of our imperfections, the apartheid didn't work. It's a very unhappy situation. A bit like communism, you know, the ideal communism is unquestionably acceptable, you know, the brotherhood of man. The reality turned into a nightmare given it's far too advanced a concept for the world to actually practice. You end up with Stalin, not communism. Okay, well, we know all about that, don't we? Thank you, Heavenly Father. So, where was I? Marriage or not marriage? But marriage is ideal, but you do need, well, should I say, a fairly ideal partner if you're going to practice. Well, you could say not too ideal. You need to be different enough for there to be differences that need to be overcome. But you might now end up so focused on the relationship and overcoming difficulties, you know, living in heaven, that you're not really doing much for the rest of the world and reaching out and blessing and extending your boundary. And that would be a great shame, wouldn't it? So it looks like it's not all plain sailing, but it doesn't seem to exclude having a partner, only that having a partner may complicate the issue, but may be necessarily part of our own individual development, that we are truly ready for the kingdom of heaven. You know, in that what every family is doing, it's trying to come to good solutions in situations where the partners are individuals, but want the unity of the family and want children, but want their individuality, but can't cope with some individualities which just stress the family too much. It's an incredible learning situation, isn't it? And so it should be. That's what the classroom's about. The classroom of this creation. Well, my desire is to trust that it's in God's hands. And perhaps that's your desire too. Thank you, Heavenly Father. Well, as a note, I realise I've not taken up the issue of sexual needs and activity, of course, and from the Pauline point of view in New Testament, that was one of the key reason that you might nonetheless be married rather than pursue a godliness without a partner. You know, I think in King James languages, if you burn and you have great needs, well, it's better to be married than not. And then that, you know, might be the case. Drive, you know, in a civilized society results in permanent relationships, like marriage. And I realise marriage is not so permanent now, especially from my own experience. But in some sense, it's at least long term, as opposed to you know, endless one night stands or something. So the sex drive in a civilized society brings people into a situation where they have to try and harmonize individuality at close range in an ongoing relationship. And it's all part of the lessons of life, isn't it? I think the typical religious understanding is that if you're not going to be married, being alone is in some sense problematic and only really valid if you're going to be devoted to the wider family of fellowship and God. And I guess for our stability of mind and fullness of life experience, that is really true. I mean, we have the other religious tradition which says, no, you can be a recluse, cut off from much of society and people. You could even be a hermit. In a monastery, of course, you're having to interact and cope with a whole variety of people in a formal organizational setting, and that's extremely demanding. More demanding, really, than being in the world where you, well, certainly in many societies, have the opportunity of escaping from contact with people you'd rather not have more contact with anyway. Whereas the recluse, of course, cuts off from all and, well, really does become rather weird, at least from general civilized perspective, of course. But equally, one could argue, perhaps make some staggering breakthrough in God realizations. I'm not entirely sure about that, by which I mean I'm just not sure. Might be the case, might not. Then it may also be extremely hazardous that you become weird or, well, what the world would simply say, well, that's mental illness, isn't it? That's not a spirituality. Certainly forced solitary confinement seems potentially awful if you're forcing it on yourself. Well, it depends what we mean by forcing it on yourself, I suppose. If you're choosing it, well, I still think there's a tremendous risk of your behavior and understanding and development is actually handicapped by not having the input of other people, even if you find such other people a distraction of time from your main purpose. Some distractions are necessary, aren't they? Well, I think they are. I suppose we could say it depends just on how real and how valid your relationship is with God. Clearly, if it's absolutely real and valid and of the sort where God is the most perfect company, then well, I was going to say presumably our spiritual progress is then at its best, but you could argue no, God has chosen, not we ourselves. God has chosen that we experience at least civilization as it is on the planet, wherever we are, and that is in fact the ideal, where God has us. modified by such reasonable choices as we then make within that setting. We might make such a choice as to not mix with violent people because, and law-abiding people in general say, because such brings evil. Simply that. In which case, well, that's certainly seems valid, doesn't it? So we have from one extreme where we are a recluse, hermit, if you like, separate from others, to the other extreme where we're married, but to more or less the right person, you know what I mean? Someone that we can attempt considerable harmony with, and in total outcome be much better than if we didn't have their company, and them us. There's an in-between stage which is perhaps, it's not really on the same dimension, but you can just be single but in the world, and having to interact much more then with a much wider variety of people, although you'd probably be picking and choosing where you were most effective and at any given time. Although this might clash a bit with some principles of loyalty and so on, you might have to give way to that, and therefore become exercised in harmonizing differences or finding a harmony within the differences. I think as a default position, marriage with the right person is best, but two worldlings getting married, well, I suppose two very worldly people getting married do experience the learning situation, don't they? But it doesn't look a very stable relationship, of course. But that might be better than them being single. I think probably so. I really think the way to balance is on marriage. Two is better than one. No man's an island unto himself. Most people are nowhere near sufficient to handle isolation or have a sufficient view of God to make such stably feasible. So we tend to come up with the classic nonconformist view, which is, Christian nonconformist church view, which is that marriage is preferable, fellowship in general good, and we all know there will be problems with marriage and there will be problems with general fellowship, like being in any organisation. Hopefully a bit better because it's spiritually orientated, we hope, the church. And you're more likely to find a partner that you can be in harmony with, it's feasible, from someone who is from your own religious view, or even your own non-religious view, as you see it. Yes, thank you, Heavenly Father.